Okay, your first lesson is on the field. We'll start each lesson with a pretest. This is just to give you an idea of what things to pay attention to as we go. This is not something you need to know yet. Okay, these are the questions you'll need to answer at the end of the lesson to know that you've mastered this information. Okay, so whenever I use this red lightsaber, red means stop. That means you don't need to write anything down, just pay attention to the questions. I'll switch to green when it's okay to write stuff. Okay, so number 1, what is the length of the field of play? Number 2, what is the length of the field including the end zones? Number 3, what is the width of the field to the nearest yard? Number 4, how high is the crossbar? Number 5, how wide is the crossbar? Number 6, what is the distance between hashes and between hash and near sideline? And number 7, what is the purpose of the hashes? Your objective for this lesson is that you should be able to identify the features of a football field and the metrics associated with those features. Okay, here are your key concepts: field of play, sideline, goal line, end line, goalpost, uprights, crossbar, hashes, and numbers. If at any time you need more time than I'm allowing here on these clips, please pause the video and use your time. This is a football field. Not that football. This football. What are all these lines? That's hard to see. Hold on. These ones are called yard lines. Each one is a yard apart. There's 100 of them. It's hard to count to 100 fast, so we use bigger lines. Like this one's 5 yards, and that one's 10 yards. The numbers go up to 50. That's the 50-yard line. It's special because it's in the middle. The numbers go down to the 0-yard line. Well, there is no 0-yard line. We call it the goal line. The end zones are past these lines in red. Well, now they're blue. And they are 10 yards deep. So the whole field is 120 yards. See these lines over here? Those are sidelines. What about the arrows by the numbers? They point to the closest end zone so that you can tell which side you're on, even if you can't see the whole field. Oh, those yellow slingshot things behind the field? Those are called goalposts. There are various opportunities throughout the game to score by kicking a ball through the uprights. Okay, so here's a high school football field. As you can see, there's a lot of numbers here, a lot of different measurements. Okay, so we're going to talk about the most important ones and explain what they each mean. This area here, in these boundaries, is called the field of play. The length of this field of play is 100 yards. Then there's these 2 end zones in red. Okay, so I outline those. Those are 10 yards deep each, 10 yards, and 10 yards here. So the entire length of the field is 100 plus both of those end zones, which are 10 each. So that's 20 altogether. That makes 120 yards. Okay, so the entire field is 120 yards long. Let's talk about the width of the field. The width will be 160 feet, okay, or in yards, 53 1/3 yards. That's how wide it is. These lines that run down parallel to each other down the sides of the field, these are called sidelines. And anything outside of the sidelines is out of bounds. That's also true of anything outside of these lines, which are called the end lines. Okay, there's another line that's very important. This line right here, perhaps the most important line. Okay, this line separates the field of play from the end zones. It's called the goal line. Okay, it's called that because if you cross that in possession of a ball, then you score, as long as it's the other team's end zone. We'll talk more about that in the next lesson. And these little lines that run parallel to each other, they look like zippers almost, or a seam on a shirt or something. These are called hash marks. The play ends anywhere outside hashes. Okay, outside meaning closer to the sidelines. Then the ball for the next play gets spotted on that closest hash. On a high school field, this area outside the hash this area outside this hash and this area in between the hashes all have the same measurement of width, which is 18 yards. Okay, so we said the field was 53 1/3 yards wide. Each of these sections is 1/3 of that, which is roughly 18 yards. Okay, so these numbers here, okay, so that's how many yards away from the nearest end zone it is. So this yard line is 10 yards, 20 yards, that's how far it is away from the nearest end zone. And then of course when you get to the other side of the field, the numbers go down because they're getting closer to the farther end zone. The tops of the numbers are 9 yards away from the sideline. And we know that this hash is 18 yards from the sideline. Then that tells us that the segment between the hash and the top of the numbers is also 9 yards. Okay, and that's also true on this side. So now we have the field divided into 6 equal segments, all right, of 9 yards. Okay, last part we need to talk about. These are the goals. Okay, these are called the goals. All right, they look much different now than they used to, but they're fairly standardized now. So these are the rules about the goalposts. Okay, they must be 10 feet high at the top of the crossbar. This is the crossbar because it goes across. All right, that crossbar has a clearance of 10 feet, just like a basketball goal. Since we're talking about high school football, the width of these uprights is 23 feet 4 inches. In college and in the NFL, that's 18 feet 6 inches. But in high school, it's 23 feet 4 inches. And this means that a ball kicked in order to score points has to cross over this crossbar and go between these uprights that are 23 feet 4 inches apart in order to be counted as a good score, whether it's a field goal or an extra point. So what have we learned? Well, we've learned there's 100 lines between the end zones, 5 yards between each big line, and 10 yards between the numbers. The 50-yard lines in the middle, and behind the end zones are the goalposts, and that's a football field. Okay, so it's time to take your test for the field lesson. Go ahead and pause this recording, and when you're done with the test, check back in and we'll go through it together. Okay, so pause now, and I'll see you soon. All right, welcome back. Let's go through these answers. What is the length of the field of play? Okay, we mentioned before that is 100 yards. What is the length of the field including the end zones? All right, we said that there were 2 end zones and that they were each 10 yards deep. Okay, so for a total of 20 yards. And we add that to the field of play distance, which is 100 yards. And that equals 120 yards. What is the width of the field to the nearest yard? Okay, so from sideline to sideline, that distance. 53 1/3 yards, but to the nearest yard, that is 53 yards. How high is the crossbar? That was 10 feet. How wide is the crossbar? In high school, we said that was 23 feet, 4 inches. Now remember, in the NFL and in college football, the crossbar is only 18 feet, 6 inches. All right, number 6, what is the distance between the hashes and between the hash and the near sideline? So if you remember, the hashes and the sidelines split the field into 3 equal segments. Okay, and the width of those segments is 18 yards. So 18 yards from the sideline to the hash, from the hash to the hash, and from the hash to the sideline. Okay, what is the purpose of the hashes? So the purpose of the hashes is to spot the ball. Spot the ball. Okay, meaning that's where they'll put the ball down to start the next play if the ball or if the last play was over somewhere outside of the hashes.